Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Off-White Coat Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Abney, and today I'm joined by a trauma surgeon, a community leader, a motivational speaker, and the co-host of a radio show. I'm very interested to speak with him today. He has turned his tragedies into triumph. He's the author of a book called Saved. Please, everybody, join me to welcome Dr. Thayer. Be like, whatever. Yeah, Greece was amazing. I highly recommend going just because it was beautiful and the people were super nice. You meet, I guess I met Greeks. Like I have a really good friend who his whole family or his family's Greek. And I mean, just a character, just a great, fun-loving guy. Yeah. But you go there and it's like everybody's that.
Yeah.
So very friendly.
The accent, there was a urologist who was, Simopoulos was his last name. And yeah, he'd come back with just an accent. You couldn't even understand what he was saying in English. But yeah, just that's what I found. I mean, I was blessed to like travel when I was 10 to go to England and then Europe. And just the people were amazing, you know. And then I grew up competitively swimming, and I knew the West German and East German athletes. I knew the Russian athletes, and they're just people, you know. It's like you hear this propaganda and what gets posted in the media. I think 10 was my big experience about media. So I'm at Buckingham Palace and the changing of the guard, and something happened, and I got to witness what happened. And I get back to America and I'm looking at the newspapers and the news, and it's like, no, that's twisted. It's not exactly what happened.
Yeah, you got a full hand exposure into the propaganda machine.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
How the filter can change.
Yeah. I mean, I hiked. My uncle took me when I was like 19 to Machu Picchu. He's like a big traveler. And so, but that was my first time really like leaving the country. And we spent like a month in Peru. And just that experience alone, like, I don't know, it like reshaped my brain. Like I was able to, and then I just got almost like, I love it now. I love like seeing new cultures and how people live. And you realize that America is really, really young compared to all the other countries in the world.
Yeah.
And so it's weird that we sometimes, like coming from America, you kind of think like, oh, okay, like there's kind of like some patriotism, pride, you know, you've got this emotional connection to it. But then you go and see other places and you're like, oh, okay, like there's other ways to do this, or just it really broadens and it increases your empathy too. I think it really did that for me.
Totally. Yeah. Totally agree.
Allows you to connect with other people. So that is one thing I guess I really I wanted to ask you anyway, because I heard that you do like medical missionary work and everything.
I do. Yeah.
Where do you usually go, or do you have somewhere?
2010 is when I started. So I was going to a church and they had begun going to Honduras. And it began with a couple, husband and wife. She was a ICU nurse. He was one of those crazy max face people that go and do an ENT residency and then go back to dental school to learn how to take care of the palate and the teeth and all that stuff. So they're doubly docked, so to speak. And then they come and they do, and so they started doing cleft palates. Almost got stopped, but then they had photographs of these kids looking incredibly different, and they continued. And then I guess the story was he had a Lamborghini or a Ferrari and sold it, and then they were working for Health or Doctors Without Borders, and it didn't have really a Christian. It has a service mentality, but it didn't have a Christian one, and they wanted to make it more Christian. So they bought the end of this building and converted it to an operating room. And so I came, and I had retractors were like the ones you put in someone's mouth to keep their mouth open.
Oh my goodness.
Hernia repairs. And it was all outpatient stuff. So that was 2010. And then in November of 2010, we went to Haiti. So it was 9 months after the earthquake, landed in Port-au-Prince and went to the northwest area, closest to Cuba. Supposed to be a hurricane charted by like 3 weather services to come right at us. It ended up going between us. The fact that 62 people from the church went on this, the fact that we got there was a miracle. It was the first day the TSA had a brand new program. That's always a bad day to travel. Yeah. And so it literally took my wife and I 15 minutes. We were the first ones to step up and go through passport check, all that stuff. And I go, well, we've got 60 other people to do this. There's no way we're going to make it. And then God created a lightning storm in Dallas, which is where we're going to land. And then Dallas to Florida, Florida into Port-au-Prince. And we all got in. We all made it. And then one of the OB guys had this $40,000 ultrasound machine that he borrowed from Kaiser Permanente Medical Group. And then it didn't show in Florida where it was supposed to. I'm like, oh my gosh, he just prayed and there it was in Haiti. So, and
it showed up in Haiti?
It showed up in Haiti.
Oh.
So, and then the fun part of Haiti was
works in mysterious
some of us, half of us got on a plane and went to the airstrip that we were landing in. It was a gravel field. They had to clear the animals out of the way for you to land, but it had to have special tires on the plane. So some got on right there. Some had to fly to another airport to get on a plane that had the right tires. And that's what we had to do. So I think we had 5 airplanes we were on that trip. But yeah, so just the poverty and the fact that nothing had been done, and then the incredible story of Jude in the book, this 14-year-old. We were there when one of the UN troops from, I think, Southeast Asia brought in cholera. And Americans never see cholera unless you're doing mission trips in third world countries. And man, it was like we started seeing 100 people a day, and then 300 people a day. They had all these supplies that weren't used because, I mean, I think everybody went to Port-au-Prince for medical care, and they have 6 operating rooms there. They could have done all the wound care and the amputations that you see, eye care that you see with earthquake victims, and it just never got used. And so, and I'm like, I didn't have anesthesia with me, so I really couldn't do anything other than local surgery with numbing medicine. And I'm like, I felt like my skill set's not being used. And then I finally, about the 3rd day, I did a couple minor procedures, and then I went to the cholera clinic. It was a classroom, 1 room, cement floor, everybody's on it with IVs and antibiotics going. And there's these infants that are dying. They're not even moving. Their eyes are so sunken in that and I'm like, why? You know, and the paramedics that were there and the nurses couldn't get IVs in them. And I walk over to a table that had supplies on it, and there's this brown box of solid needles. They're 14 gauge needles. I'm like, why would we have these? There's no one that's going to want to get stuck by these things. We're not giving IM, intramuscular shots. So it's like, this is an interosseous. This is trauma for a kid. So I went over the first one, and literally, if you've ever had an antenna on a car, that's kind of the caliber of this needle, and it's also hollow tube. If you bend that antenna and you try and bend it back, it's going to snap, and then in a child, it's going to be in their shin. So I'm like nervous and keep pushing, and then finally it gives, and I think, man, did it go all the way through the leg? And I go, no, because it would take just as much force to get through the backside of the bone. So aspirate, there's marrow, give fluids in the marrow, and resuscitate these kids. So that was my purpose on this trip, was to be there for these infants and sticking needles in their shins to give them fluid and save them.
That's awesome. So when there's so many questions that just ran through my mind. 62 people, are they all medical?
No, yeah. And that's just the thing. I mean, people will go. There was one trip I went to Honduras. One of good friends of mine, he's a tile layer, so he's, blue collar, and he's just sitting there at the table at dinner, and he's like, man, I'm not doing anything. I go, well, what are you working on? He goes, we're putting in this well, and I'm like, it's out in the middle of a village. We have to go through these streams, and it's like Indiana Jones jungle-like. and I go, Dave, how many people is this going to could give fresh water to every day? It's like 5,000. It's gravity fed, so it's sustainable. And I go, you're saving more lives than I ever will on these trips. I mean, the last 2 years, it's been amazing. I had an A team this last trip. We did 48 and a half. I say a half because we had one person we put under anesthesia, and then his heart rate went to almost 0, and we're like, oh, this ain't gonna happen. So, and they don't have cardiologists that are going to come over and put a pacemaker in, or, all the things we do in America. So, but 4 laparoscopic gallbladders and 44 hernias in 4.5 days.
Man,
Yeah,
cranking
that's
them
jamming.
out.
That's
Yeah,
jamming. Because
yeah.
we had Brenda Rice, who was one of the pioneers and the founders of this. She went back to school and became a CRNA, certified nursing RN, so she could do anesthesia. She brought a trainee with her, so I had 2 anesthesiologists, and they could just tag team it. They were the line them up, get an IV in them pre-op, and then get them in, get them under, and then recover them. So it just was amazing. So, and then the other key was, which I'd never had, there was a PA from Idaho who was a cardiothoracic PA. So he knows how to close the incisions, the skin, and not do the repair, but the skin. So it's like he would be the doc out in the villages, and then come in the afternoon when he got back to the operating room, and then just help. So he'd come in and close the incisions. I get a 5-10 minute break of just sitting down, hydrating, and take care of my body. Yeah. Next up.
Good Lord, that's a lot. Oh, and for the I wanted to ask more too. Sorry, my voice.
Okay.
But the when you were doing the interosseous with the needle, were you just going straight in with the needle, like just taking the needle going straight into the shin?
Perfectly perpendicular, yeah.
Okay, because like, so for
they have
anybody that's not,
guns.
oh, carry on.
No, I'm saying in America they have guns that like just
I've only seen the screw
they're a
gun.
screw,
Yeah.
yeah.
So for anybody that doesn't know, I guess what we're talking about is if you can't get IV access, sometimes it's easier to go in, especially in children, correct? Like you can go interosseous, which is like kind of drilling into the shin bone. I've only seen it like used a screw gun specifically. I didn't realize that you could just take the needle and nail it perfect.
Well, that was my brain. I mean, that was a God moment, right? Some voice in my head says, these are big. They're solid. If you don't bend it and you maintain perfect force perpendicular to the bone and just steady, and you shouldn't bend it, you shouldn't break it. And so, I mean, they didn't move when I did that.
That's amazing.
Not at all. I'm like, it was spooky. But yeah, but it was a miracle that then there's more resistance. The bone, a lot of our bones are hollow on the inside. That's where the marrow is. And so that's what we found. I mean, if you watch the videos, which you can YouTube these things now, if people listening want to really be wicked and watch, but there's a sternal one for adults. I'm like, yeah, man, that's not going to go into the heart.
Yeah. You're like, I'd rather take it in the shin.
Yeah. Not the heart, not the Nicolas Cage and the Rock, I think. Yeah.
What is the name of the mission group that you use?
It's the Rice Foundation. They're out of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and they've teamed up. I think they do it perfectly. My recommendation for mission trips, and especially medical, is you want to be linked with the native people. So Ricardo was a bright scholar out of Honduras, got a free scholarship, became a business, got an MBA in Texas, and now he's back taking care of his people. And he links with the churches. So the pastors reach out, and what happens is they'll announce medical brigade's going to be here on these dates. They have some skin in the game, so they have to pay a small amount of money for a ticket to get through the door. But then they're there not looking for shoes or sunglasses or all the other things we do. So we do dental, pediatrics, there's a family doc that goes, yes, and then construction, and then VBS. So we're going out to villages. I think my wife would go every other year, and our 2 youngest, man, they started going when they were 7. So, and they're playing soccer along this, it's the Pan American Highway. I'm like, it's busy. But it's literally like romancing the stone. There's places that it's washed out, and you got to get across it, and you're in a bus. Classic mission trips. I think we had a one-handed driver one time, and it's dark. It's a long day. You sleep deprived. All those things. Yeah.
You're like, please just let us get to the destination.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I also think it's great for your kids too, like just to see,
Yeah,
for one, you putting in that work. It kind of, shows them a good role model, but also allows them to interact with, people from different countries and
yeah,
that are a little bit more or in poverty or more destitute than they would be.
right, right. Yeah, I mean, they're not wearing shoes, so
Yeah.
yeah, and then they get to go
That
out and
puts it into
see.
perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Honduras is known, I think, for tobacco and coffee. So they were out helping spread coffee beans out to dry them out and
Hmm.
stuff. And then they get offered coffee, but you're always worried about the water. So how hot did you get this? And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Please tell me it was boiling before.
yeah,
Well, Dr. Thayer, I didn't want to slow us down and honestly, I really enjoyed talking to you. So,
yeah,
but for anybody that doesn't know you, could you give us like a little bit of your background and like because your medical journey?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Medical journey wise, I think it began like in high school. So I was just blessed to know what I wanted to do. I was tutoring some blind students, so I knew I loved to help and teach. It was in geometry, which is a challenge when you're blind because how do you see a circle?
Yeah.
So, like you said, you become an empath because you have to think outside of your own brain and go, how are they doing this, and how do I need to teach them? And then I love working with my hands, so I knew I wanted to be a surgeon. And then junior year, I took an anatomy physiology class, and that was it. It's the human body's amazing. I got to go into medicine, be a surgeon. It combines all those gifts and talents. And then the end of my junior year, I had a twisted intestine. I ate a bunch of lasagna that my mom had made, and then drank some milk, and it gets in a loop of your small intestine, and it twists, and then you're in trouble. Throwing up all night. I lost almost 30 pounds from vomiting all night. My dad finds me on the bathroom floor upstairs and go to the pediatrician's office. But that's funny because I didn't really think about general surgery at that point. I just wanted to be a cardiothoracic because that seemed like, you watch Hawkeye on MASH or, that kind of stuff. He's a chest cutter. Yeah. So, and then it was getting into undergrad, which was just incredible at UC Davis. But I mean, that was a challenge because my freshman year, my mom dies. She has a heart attack pretty much in her sleep. And, I'm black, dark dorm room with my other roommate, and phone rings, and it's my dad, and he's just like, I don't know how to tell you this. I don't know how to tell you this, but your mom just passed. And so I took off to go home to be there for my dad for a bit. I was in an all male dorm floor, and they're like, he'll never come back. He'll never come back.
Mhm.
I did. I finished sophomore year when I'm taking organic chem, physics, bacteriology, biochemistry, biochem lab, 18 units. I come around the corner after a back P lab, and I'm on the wrong side of the road. It's my fault. And this girl pulls out on her bicycle, and I just jackknife my wheel and go over. I get up, make sure she's okay. Didn't hit her. She's fine. The next thing I remember, I'm sitting on a curb and there's an ambulance in front of me. So I got knocked out. They
Oh,
take me to the health center. I have a lacerated ear. They stitch that up. They send me back. And that evening, I'm like, I can't hear very well out of this ear, and there's this fluid coming out of it. What is this? So I call, and it's some grad student that just answers the phone, and I'm like, is this a problem? He goes, I don't know. What do you think? I don't know. But I have a bacteriology midterm tomorrow. It ends at 3:30. I could get to the clinic at 4:30ish, and I did. They X-ray my head, and I've got a basal skull fracture. So it's like, oh
yeah.
yeah. And so
Taking the
because
final with the skull fracture, I'm sure was.
yeah, so I got air in my head, and I'm in their head anyway, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah. So they admit me until that stops. They got me on antibiotics. It was like almost 2 weeks of it was we're on a quarter system at Davis. So that's like almost 20% of your, and I'm like, oh my gosh, again, he's not going to make it. And if you
Mhm.
get off series, you're not going to graduate in 4 years. So it's like, I made it. And then junior year, my dad gets diagnosed with lung cancer. He's got a whiteout of his chest. So he's got a bunch of fluid on that one side, and they drain it. And sure enough, it's got cancer cells in it. And so it's a stage 4. And then he's going through chemo and stuff, and I'm offering to come home, and he's like, no, you got a bigger purpose. And the miracle that year was I was in a 5-person dorm suite, and then down the hallway was a phone jack. For folks that don't remember old phones, you had to pay for long distance calls. And so, and rotary phones, then punch phones. And so I would hook up to that, and I would call my dad in the Bay Area. It was a long distance call, and I wouldn't get a bill on our room. And then I would go to the office, and I'm like, are you guys getting a bill for this? I want to make sure you guys get paid. And it wasn't going anywhere. So I never got charged for talking 2-3 hours to my dad every night that year. And then between junior and senior year, he passed away. He became paralyzed, and I had to carry him in. Yeah. So, and again, they were like, yeah, he's not. And I did. But then the interview process, and you've gone through this. So Georgetown, most expensive med school in the United States. I hadn't really been back east at this point. So, but I had been to Europe, like you said. You think, America's old, but it's not. You go to Europe, and it's like thousands of years old, right? So, and this is, 1600 or whatever. So, and I hadn't really thought about this. So one of the interviews was with the financial aid office, and we're all parked on a wooden bench outside this door, and one would go on, you'd slide down to the next spot, and I'm the next one in, and I hear this guy talking, and the question was, how do you pay? How are you going to pay for your school? And I hear this weird noise, and he says, cash, cold hard cash. And I'm like, okay. So then I go in, and I drop my pen, and I lean over to pick it up, and I hear that noise, which was just the chair squeaking when you lean forward. So I'm visioning him leaning forward and saying, closer to her face, cash, cold hard cash. But that was that moment. I'm like, how am I going to pay for this? So my parents are gone, and anyway. So I think I said, like, well, military may pay if whatever way I can do it, I want to do it. So, and luckily I got in it. The Davis thing was crazy because I interviewed there, and then if you get a thin letter, you've been rejected. And so I had like 18 or 20 thin letters that I could have wallpapered my room with. And then I get one from Davis, and it says, congratulations, you've not been accepted. I'm like,
what?
What?
I hate those.
You're on a wait list, right? So I'm like, okay, there's still hope. And then somewhere in the summer, I was waiting for a roommate to give me a call to pick him up. And so I answered the phone, Craig's taxi service. And it's this lady, oh, this is UC Davis Medical School. Is Craig Thayer there? I'm like, oh, just a second, let me go get him.
Yeah.
Same voice, no change. I'm like, she had been scratching her head, like, what was that? So I got in. Yeah, so that was a miracle. But yeah, and then in med school, it was a couple of experiences. I still was interested in cardiothoracic. I did my own acting internship with a group that was downtown in Sacramento, and just realized, hey, they do incredible stuff, and they're incredibly dedicated. At a second's moment, they're in there with people bypassing their hearts and stuff, but they do really two things, valves and bypass. And that's not technically, it's challenging, but the brain work and then being at a VA hospital where a guy had a lung cancer and started to bleed, and he's basically drowning, and they couldn't put a tube in his trachea to breathe for him or do a tracheostomy. And I'm like, I want to do something that I can save anybody's life any way I can. And the way we got trained back in the day in the late 80s and 90s was, from head to toe. So we learned how to drill a burr hole in the skull, and trauma was huge. UC Davis has the highest amount of blunt trauma in the United States, so not as much penetrating stuff. But yeah, so it was just, I got to go into general surgery, and that's what I did.
Yeah, I feel like you were almost destined to go into general surgery, just because a significant portion of your childhood you were either having to go to the hospital or something, spending time in surgeons
true
office. But I really, because that was I was kind of debating. First off, I think that just because like my prayers go out to you and your family. Like I know that must have been really tough for you when, especially when you were growing up. But for something looking from the bottom end, and I know I just met you or whatever, but it seems like those hardships really created a person that was very motivated. And like it's odd how the world or the Lord works in mysterious ways,
Right. Totally.
So I
Yeah.
hate that that had to happen. But I think you've saved a lot of people in the process, so I'm sure they would be proud of you.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you for saying that. And I grew up part of the mandate. So I was also an orphan. So my natural mother was from Michigan, and then 6 months out she started to show. So she would have been shunned by the Catholic Church. So she moved to California to a friend, and then had me in Monterey, California, and then had me for 10 days. Had me baptized because my wife is one of these techie people that she could be a PI if you needed somebody, but she found my natural family, and then I've gotten pictures and been back for reunions and that kind of stuff. So great family. And it's like I can't imagine the courage she had. So like I posted for Mother's Day, how many people have two moms? It's great. And my mom would have passed away tomorrow. Literally, the night she died, I'd been there the weekend before for Mother's Day,
Mm.
and it was kind of the first time, I think, because I was just one of those jerk rebellious sons that I always gave my dad credit for teaching me to be a better empath and learn about my own body language and behavior and tone of voice. But really my mom was the sounding board or the punching board. So, and that was like the first weekend that we just had a great time. And we're, I think I was now a young man to her, right? So she grew up in World War II with, I think, 12 when the London bombings were going on. And,
Mhm.
so it's like, yeah, just
Oh,
blessed. But like I said in my book, I'm like, I felt like I was like an Indianapolis, car, and my mom and dad were pace cars, and they led me out, drove off, I hit the gas, and there I go. So, um, but yeah, and then just being rebellious, and it's like, I tortured one of my friends that during a summer work program at Hewlett Packard. My dad worked there, and he was going to seminary school, and I'm like, hey, what do you think of Led Zeppelin? Stairway to Heaven. I would just ask because I knew enough to like drive him crazy and ask about his faith. And
Yeah.
I wasn't as solid at that point, obviously. So, but I would say, look, my parents, I cup's half full. That I'm a better doctor because I know what death is like,
Hmm.
and what you go through when you lose your first parent and you bond to the second one and realize parents aren't immortal, and then you lose the second one and you realize, hey, I'm probably not immortal either. So yeah, you get perspective.
Yeah, because my childhood was a little twisted as well, and but I always have said like the brighter side of it is that all superheroes have tragic backstories. Like you don't get to
Right.
be the
Right.
superhero
Yeah.
without something going on. So I mean, and you're
Yeah.
really a testament to that because you've with the missionary work and then the time. I mean, trauma surgeon. That's it's pretty impressive. So that pace
Yeah.
car,
Well,
yeah, they really set the pace.
you're going that route. You matched in the ER.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Me
let's hope
too. Yeah.
we both love a little chaos. I was really torn. I was like dual applying, and because I really wanted to do, I had this like when I'm in the operating room, I could be there all day. Like my
Right.
fiance, the problem was, I think I could when I was doing my surgery rotations, like I would just be like, oh, let's do another month of this. Like
Yeah.
just having
Yeah.
like what happens if this person does, I will stay late, I'll do, but then I was like, oh my God, keeping up that pace. I
Right.
was like, it might be really difficult in the long run.
Right.
Um, I
Yeah.
know
Work
she's
life.
probably a little bit more excited that,
Yeah.
but I don't know. There's something about like, and that's honestly why I love emergency medicine too, is that feeling of whenever you are in that critical um position, I kind of feel like there's been a lot. There's like just like more calm than I would be like scatterbrained. Like I'm like things have to be perfect, obviously, but or not perfect, but things have we've got to make do. But I just can like really compartmentalize,
Right.
and
Right.
and that's kind of what makes it fun. Like I instead of going all crazy, I'm like, oh, this is like really neat. Like, yeah, he did come in with a gunshot, right? You know,
Right.
piercing the diaphragm, but like now we're on the ball.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and
And
so
the, you know, I mean, the like ATLS, right? So it's your brain gets into compartmentalizing in an algorithm, airway, breathing, circulation, you know,
mhm.
um, defects and environment type stuff. So yeah, and you keep your brain on that, and then it's kind of like Kevin Costner's movie. I forget, For the Love of the Game, I think, where he's trying to pitch a perfect game, uh, and he, you know, his verbiage is clear the mechanism, right? So you gotta check out and just focus, and then that's there's a part of the book that I wrote that goes through really kind of harrowing cases. One of which was like a 6-year-old, and you know, you've done all you can do, and then you pull back the drapes because you've opened their chest to do open heart massage, and then explore their belly, and there was nothing there. It's just a head injury, and yeah, then it becomes real. Then you just
Mhm.
you weep. Yeah, you have to experience. I think if you over compartmentalize, it's like it's just going to come back to haunt you. But yeah, I memorializing things is key. Taking time and
Mhm.
re-experiencing and going through it, and that stuff is important.
Yes, yeah, and I definitely want to get back to your book. I actually the cardiothoracic thing. It was funny that you had wanted to do that because I actually when I was younger I was like, oh, this would be so much fun. And then my first surgery rotation, I had like 2 weeks down there or in the cardiothoracic unit, and the surgeries were so long.
Right,
And you're standing, and I was like, and I had no role besides just standing scrubbed
right,
up,
yeah,
so
yeah,
I just was in the way. The tubes were running like through my legs,
yeah,
and my hands were like up here, and
yeah,
I was like, oh, I don't know if I was like, this
right.
one's not near as much fun as like the general surgery.
No, no,
Yeah,
absolutely not. Yeah,
I had like 6 weeks of general surgery, and then like, oh yeah, you just got the cardiothoracic. Don't worry, it's like really not that bad. And I was like, oh, this one's gonna be so much fun. I'm gonna get to
yeah,
the heart, and then I was just
yeah.
like,
No,
uh,
no, and neurosurgery is even worse because now you're under a microscope and you
yeah.
can't see what's going on if you're just standing there pulling some retractor and like, okay, how's it going? Oh,
Mhm.
another 8 hours. Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Someone turn on my stockings, please. I need. Oh
yeah, I
my
was like, "I
god.
gotta pee." Oh my god.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm sure because with me, I'm sure residency was even a lot tougher because they've made a lot of like concessions or
Right,
um, changes to the whole schedule so that there can be more time off for the residents.
right.
And but even now, like getting the schedules and everything, I'm like, oh, there's not. You're going to be working well over the average,
Right.
like an
Yeah,
average
the
American. So, how was your residency whenever you were?
okay, so yeah, again, I was blessed. So 6 years, one research year. So you're doing I did transplants. So I was like putting thyroids in mice and pancreases in rats and that kind of stuff. So I got some microsurgery, which is really fun. I drink too much coffee. There was no way I could do it.
Yeah.
You develop this tremor under a 10 power microscope, like, or you drink alcohol the night before, it'll give you a tremor the next day that you can't see to the eye, but you'll see it when you're doing that. But yeah, there was no 80-hour work week. That was just starting to come in the mid, probably like 1994, 95. So, um, and I mean, I'd worked 164 hour, but I'm just like you, where I loved it. You know, the problem with being on every other day is you miss half the cases,
Yeah.
right? So, but yeah, yeah, I got married during that time and had 2 kids while I was in residency and one after that. So it was like yeah, you can still live, and the wives will say, yeah, they feel like single moms a lot of the time, but it just, I mean, the draw and the thing, because it's just so life changing, but it's also can go the other way. So I remember when I sat down with one of my professors to say, hey, look, I really want to go here, and he was like one of the world renowned pancreatic surgeons, and Dr. Fry, and he's like, his first question was, what are you going to do when your patient you've operated on dies? And my answer was, I'll just know I did the best job I could do that day. And it's kind of in God, not that you're not watching for a complication of your own thing, but it's not like you just walk away. But at some point, God heals that wound. I've hurt somebody, and then I close the skin, and all the miraculous things that our bodies do, not part of what I can do. Heal.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing, like how will and just divine intervention, or I don't know. It's something that has nothing to do with
Right.
like you put the groundwork in, but it's not. It's out of your hands.
Right.
Which is just amazing.
Yeah.
It's also amazing. Like I don't think people understand that when you say you worked well over 100 hours a week, like the average, or there's only 20, if there's 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, I just looked up, that's 168 hours.
Right.
And if you sleep 8 hours a day, which never really happens, that's 56 hours. So that means you have 6 hours to do whatever you would want to do,
right,
not including driving home or doing whatever.
Yeah.
Seeing your kids. And so it's like you got to make a lot of sacrifices.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. And not all services were like that. So it was, but like for trauma, it was 24 on, 24 off. It was really like 36 hours on, because you wouldn't want to leave your intern partner off, without all the stuff getting done. And I remember this is also in the book, Blaisdell. Dr. Blaisdell was like one of the pioneers out of San Francisco for trauma, all the late 60s and early 70s Vietnam War riots at Berkeley, etc. And they came up with a trauma team that only took care of trauma. And then they published their data comparing it to Orange County, and the preventable death rate in Orange County was like 30 something percent, and it was 0.1% in San Francisco. So that began trauma centers across the United States. But yeah, he did the same thing in Sacramento, was just make it all come to us. And that guy's work ethic was just crazy. So yeah, but yeah, and I was coming on for trauma and as an intern, and he stands everybody. He believed in beginning our rounds in the ER. The trauma surgeon should know every patient in the ER so he can be helpful to the ER docs and know what's going on. If there's a belly that's not good, to help expedite, whatever, someone needs a line or something, or be there and be helpful and know what's going on. So they would present every single patient. And yeah, so I'm coming on, and I guess I don't look all that good. And he stands us all around, all the medical students, like, who looks the worst of this team? And they're like pointing at me, and I'm like, and he's coming on, service. Thank you, Dr. Blaisdell.
Oh, that's amazing. Though it probably actually was very beneficial, not only for you to see like all the patients, but also your interactions with the doctors and to know them, and then that allows you to like hand off. Like you don't really understand what your teachers are really doing until you look back and then you're like, oh, this guy was actually, he had a whole plan. Because that handoff too between the ER and trauma surgery when something serious comes in is a very big deal. Like it's sometimes it's hard to, explain that, where there's only a certain amount of time and there's only certain things certain people can do. And so like you need to get them to the OR, but you have all these walls or whatever that have to come down first. You can't just run someone straight through the ER into the
right.
And so and with residents, I know I've seen that. It's just like especially if it's a new resident, and like if people aren't as trusting or whatever, it just slows down the time, and
Right.
that only hurts the patient.
Yeah, no, and my approach to leadership is a team.
Hmm.
And I may be the quarterback, but I'm no more kind of like, Christianity. There's the head, which is God, and there's the body, and all those parts are essential to the survival of the entire body, right? So same with the team that's in the ER and then the OR when they would go off to the operating room. So it's like I can't do that without other people um, doing their job, whether they're putting the EKG leads on, putting in IVs, drawing labs, getting X-rays, portables, doing parts of the physical exam that and letting people know what's going on, and oh yeah, those are people blowing hair or stuff. So it's like and that transition, because I mean you guys do a great job. So it's like, and you take a lot of ownership over what you're doing. So it's like there's a point at which the reins get handed, and it's like okay, and then you don't always get to hear the follow-up. So I always come back afterwards and go, okay, this is what we found. And because that's the great thing about my job is I get closure and I get instant quality control, because
Hmm.
if I thought it was this and I go in and it was something else that needed to get fixed, but it's not what I thought it was, then that helps me refine my skills down the road.
Hmm. I'm sure they actually really appreciate that, because there's just the amount of follow up, like, I don't know, it just allows uh, for you to have a better connection with them, and
Yeah,
because they really won't get to see it, and you don't want to send. It's weird. It's like, I guess everybody wants to handle the situation, and so it's hard to pass up something. And I'm
right,
sure as a
right,
surgeon too, it's hard to pass it to the next person, even if it
right,
is a situation. So
right. I mean, the reality is, if I'm the lead, I shouldn't be doing a lot of procedural stuff, because I need to pay attention to the whole thing and when it needs to
exactly,
go
yeah.
somewhere else. Okay, we need to run a CT to get this ruled out. And trauma is a disease of rule outs. So it's like, it's a black box. What's going on in there? And we don't know. And we have an idea, but it's real bad because their vital signs are horrible or whatever. So you got to do something quick. Got that golden hour.
Hmm. Um, how? Okay, so if you had two kids during residency, how did you balance that work and like home life and maybe sleeping?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we had some control over. We would do like a 2-month block of stuff. So there'd be vascular, or there'd be thoracic, cardiothoracic, there'd be peds. We didn't really rotate through the burn unit, but so different things. And so knowing dates of birth and stuff, I could take that month off. We get a month vacation each year. So I'd make sure I time those, or lighter services that don't have as demanding a call and all that stuff. And so that worked. Actually, I was really lucky. So um, I was on pediatric surgery when my first one was born. So it was like, hey, which was also weird because in the Lamaze class, uh,
You're like, please do not come in.
yeah, no, there was a couple that was there and their baby had some weird heart defect. So we had to put them on ECMO. So I knew these people. Now I'm helping operate on their baby, putting these big tubes in their neck and sacrificing a carotid artery and a jugular vein. I'm like, how can you do this? You do that in an adult, they're going to stroke.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, it was interesting.
I've had some friends reach out to me now that I'm actually a doctor now, and they say, like, because I guess I was finding myself a little bit as a kid as well, and they're like, you know what, I'm not sure if you'll ever see my kid. And like, my answer is always like, the good thing is if you're seeing me, like, you're gonna be desperate enough that you'll let me do whatever I.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We see people at their worst,
Yeah.
and
Did
understanding that. Yeah. Oh
mhm.
God.
No, that's, I mean, that's the crazy thing is you actually get like acclimated to seeing people at their worst, and then you can kind of pick up on subtle things because of it. But yeah, you're always going to see them at their worst. So if someone's acting up or acting like a fool, I'm like, it really is easy to understand because it's their
Yeah.
absolute worst day. Like that.
Yeah.
if they didn't think that, they wouldn't have come to or if it wasn't the worst experience, they wouldn't
Right.
have come to the hospital.
Scared to death. I mean, obviously they're coming in to get poked, and I can't stand needles myself, so I can
Yeah.
stick anybody, no problem. But keep them away from me.
Yeah.
I wait for my TB test as long as I can, and all those things. Yeah, it's pretty
Mhm.
funny.
Did you have any like, just because we've been talking about the OR and everything, do you have any music that you play specifically when you're in the OR?
I I'm a classic rock and roll guy, but I'll listen to anything. So
Okay.
I'm
I didn't know if
involved.
you were playing some Stairway to Heaven and I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
that
yeah,
would be the
yeah.
wrong
Or
song to
AC,
play.
but sometimes like really awkward Queens, another one, Bites the Dust, comes on.
Oh
Then
yeah.
as you're about to go to sleep, probably not that great. Or
Yeah.
AC/DC, or who's the one that has Call Me a Doctor?
Dr.
Call me a
Feelgood. I know that's
doctor.
Motley Crue.
Yeah, yeah, or somebody. I'm like, although it's funny because I think I was a chief resident and there were medical students in there, and Jimi Hendrix comes on, and I go, name this artist, and none of them go, get out of my operating room until you can find out who this artist is.
That's
It's a
awesome.
joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the reality is anesthesia's got control of that. It's like, they're not scrubbed in and they've got the radio right behind them or
Oh
whatever.
yeah. They're
Yeah.
running the show. It's either that or
Yeah.
it's usually I found that it's really it would have to be a very particular surgeon. Like most of the time uh it's somebody else controlling the music.
Yeah.
The worst part is when they look at me and they're like, okay, what do you want to play? And I'm like, oh, I'm about to make a mistake here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
No, never have. I remember one of the things on the mission trips that I do, it's called the Circle of Fire. So we get done at the end of the day. Honduras has nice cigars. So I'll buy those, bring those home, give them to people. But and I'll bring them back for the first day and then usually buy more. But all the guys will gather around at the end of the day and talk about where they saw God. And we call it the Circle of Fire. So, and I'm admitting this publicly, I guess. I'll bring an Nalgene of a liter of whiskey, and it'll have a medical tape on there that says betadine prep, spark fluid, and then another one that smells like it's vodka, and and we'll just sip on that at night and just talk about what we saw, and just guys talking. I remember we stayed up till like 2 o'clock, and at the end, the one guy who actually is Buddhist, so it was good to hear about what Buddhism is and his culture, but it was like, hey, all you guys have been married and gone through a divorce, could you hang? I got some questions. I'm like, oh god. Okay, we were there for like another 2 hours of just being a brother to somebody and giving them advice. So yeah.
It's amazing how and I think we're actually kind of figuring it out more recently, but how camaraderie and everything really goes to your general health. Like, so stuff like that, while some people would say, oh, cigars are bad for you, oh, alcohol's bad for you, but we found that like those interactions though, that usually are that, and sometimes that's what drags people into doing stuff like that. That is very helpful. I think they just released something that said that like loneliness and was just the equivalent of smoking like I think it was a couple packs a day,
Yeah.
which was
Well, I
insane.
mean, yeah, look at I think women between the ages of 25 to 45 had a 6-fold increase in suicide with COVID, right? All this sheltering in, there's a risk benefit to doing that. We're built to be gregarious and socialize, and yeah, it's not good to be isolated in a room and watching YouTube all the time or
Yeah,
whatever.
certainly not. Yeah, and it's just weird. You have to play. We're all oddly animals in the system. We have to play to that to who we are. I
Yeah.
want to I know you're a very busy man, so I want to get to your book because that was very interesting. How was like the writing process? Because the more I was reading about it, like I think that it said something about you having that you had like a reading disorder that you
Right.
didn't know about until
Right.
much later in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like 8 years ago. Yeah.
So what was the reading disorder?
So I just read slow. I mean, first grade teacher, he needs to read more. Second grade teacher, he needs to read more. Third grade, walk into a dimly lit room and there's a screen with words that look like, Star Wars at the beginning and a land far away line. And I can never now keep up with the speed. You gotta slow it down or pause, or I hate titled movies where it's different language. And so all I knew is I didn't read quickly. So failed horribly after a couple of girls got up there reading at 50 million words per minute, and I'm like jumping lines and back and forth. And then our youngest son was just kind of getting in trouble at school. He's really smart, active like a boy is, and then he get done with something that's a half hour long, and then in a minute and a half, and then so we had him tested, and he's ADHD, but he's also dyslexic. And then when we were reading what the symptoms were and how that's a disability reading wise, I go, that's what I do. Every test I've ever taken, and you take a million as a doc, I would look at the length of time I had, the number of questions, and I would worry more about keeping up that how many seconds per question, the MCATs, all those things. I'm like, and it was distracting. And but it wasn't like a disability. I kind of say it's like having polio with a atrophied leg. As long as I'm walking around and have a standing or desk job, it's not a disability. It's just what it is. Same with me. And then the challenge to me was I did a Facebook survey of, should I do an audible on the book? Yes, 100%. Should I do the audible? Because I've got a deep voice and people like to hear it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it was like one guy from high school, Jim Carter, said, no, have Coyote do it. He's better. And I'm like, and as I'm going through it, I use this place that's awesome. You have a coach, and he was a theatrical director. So he could, I have a fairly, like when I present medical conferences and stuff, it's just like so monotone that it was like boring, but he could see the frequencies, though they're narrow, there are definitely, you can tell emotion in the voice, because there's some pretty, hard things to talk about. And so I got through it. Yeah. So I didn't know I had that until 8 years ago when we diagnosed our youngest son.
Yeah. So, and then for you, so you had already written the book though, correct?
Already written the book. So, and then writing the book, again, these are just like coincidence, luck, lucky. Those are God moments. Einstein would say, coincidence is just God remaining anonymous. And my grandma, who I took to Sacramento Kings games for 15 years, you got to write this book. People, it'll motivate people. Look at the adversity you've gone through. Other people have done worse and need that input. And then I went to a Grant Cardone 10X conference. It's business, and heard Kevin Hart speak about business stuff, and Magic Johnson and John Travolta and all these other people that aren't stars, but and like 4 people said, you need to be on stage. You need to write this book, and you need to be up there talking to people and giving them hope. So, and then at that conference, I met someone who used this program that you can put on your phone called Rev, and you just, like chapter 1, whatever the title is, and you just begin speaking, and then 10 minutes later, you got a transcript of that. And then you can put that into Word, and then you can just write it and add to it and realize how stupid you sound when you speak. Just off the cuff, right? So, and then I had he also recommended an editor. So that's where I would send it to her, and then she'd correct it for language and stuff, but then she'd write comments like, what's this? I don't quite understand. You clarify that, and chapter by chapter by chapter, a year and a half later, it was done.
That's actually, that feels like it was pretty quick. I really am impressed with like the technology where you can like speak into it, because I get a roadblock when I'm typing. Like I can talk and do that, and trust me, I know, like editing these podcasts and everything, I'm like, oh, I sound so stupid right there. I'm really God, I wish you had thought before you started speaking. But just like where you can like talk and then edit afterwards, because I find that some of the processes, like while I'm typing, my brain's thinking too far or thinking about the sentence, I'm like, oh, change that sentence already, and then I've
Right.
lost myself.
Right. Yeah, I think the typing for the dyslexia, you don't use your cortex to read, so like there's a limited number of characters per minute you can go through if you read using the cortex of your brain, and dyslexia is supposed to be using a more gray matter and can process at a higher speed, but it's not as organized. So you're right, you lose where you're going, or and I think typing for me, making it manual, like President Lincoln he'd get pissed off about something. I mean, I can't imagine having a country that's the most divided. I mean, we're killing each other, right, in mass quantities. And he would write stuff down, and then he'd sit down and he'd read it out loud. So it would use different parts of his brain to process what he was writing, and then usually sit on that because it was written emotionally, and then go back and revise it. And sometimes he never handed those letters to anybody, or sometimes he did get them to the people that he was trying to speak to. So, or a speech, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
So our brains are funny.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I mean, even because when I was doing the interview process for residency, I like had a, first they say you should already know kind of what you're gonna say about certain things. They're gonna ask you about what are your leadership things. And so I like typed it out, and then me and my buddy, we did like a mock interview, and then he asked me some questions, and I realized I was like, oh, and then of course we're recording each other so that we can go back and watch. And I was like, oh my God, I'm just
That's
choking the whole
that's
time.
painful. That's
Yeah,
painful.
yeah.
My
But
wife,
then right
yeah,
after that, I was able to pick up, like, your brain fixes what you want to. You hear too many times, you're like, okay,
yes,
you're gonna stop
yeah,
saying it.
yeah.
And I think it really helped me. But what were you saying about your wife?
Yeah, no, the exactly. My brain pauses, and then yeah, she's like, "You gotta stop that. You gotta stop that." So yeah, I'm better at if it's just a storytelling thing to keep it going without a pause. But if there's like if I'm trying to do something like I did a health coaching thing and created a web page just for docs, DOs, MDs, nurse practitioners, and PAs, so that we could do open, you know, unadulterated peer review of health coaching and health in America. And my wife uses a program that you lose the weight, your diabetes goes away, or your inflammatory disease. Fat is inflammatory. We all know that, but it's like just amazing anecdotally seeing these people's diseases like lupus and stuff gone if
Oh,
they're and right now we're talking about the youth. They've got half the grip strength their great grandfather did, and testosterone, that's half the, and that's overweight. I think that's
yeah.
it's just our kids are what 20% now obese. Something like
I don't know the exact number, but I know it. I thought in America it was actually higher, like per,
that.
but maybe in like the other, like in the world, it's more than likely. But I thought
Yeah,
America was even more, which that might be.
yeah,
I don't know about kids. Maybe that's like
yeah.
all.
The adult population's like over 40% now,
Yeah,
with 80 something percent overweight. Yeah,
and that definitely affects your testosterone. I feel like people don't, like, some people might work out, but they don't like work and do laborious jobs like we all or people used to do all the time. I mean, my granddad, he's retired and he still works outside almost like every day. Like that's just his
yeah.
enjoyment time. I think it's so he can get away from my grandmother, but no,
I know.
uh, but he just
I have a
loves.
friend. I have a friend that does that. Yeah,
Yeah, that's just what he does. He builds things. I'm like, it's very impressive. He'll build things in a day. Now I'm like, you also have AFib and a couple other things, so let's tone it down on building a bridge in a day. You could take it,
yeah,
you can make it a 2-day thing.
right.
But yeah, it's just our lifestyle really does affect like the whole. I don't know, the brain. Like we think of ourselves as just the whole thing, or like our consciousness is the whole body, but it's really the body, and you're living in like a small part. Like the part that is you is just a small part in the brain. It's not the
Right.
whole brain. Um, So you gotta follow what your whether it's like because you can feel like driven to do things and stuff like that, and that's your body or the Lord or whatever. I don't maybe both. And so you really have to follow that too, those little proddings instead of just being
Right.
like, oh, this is I'm just gonna watch YouTube all day because this I enjoy this. Like
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a friend that I grew up from 2.5 on yesterday, and his mom's got Alzheimer's, and it's interesting. So Down syndrome and Alzheimer's, or dementia for that matter at all, towards the end, your brain, so there's a connection to your organs, they forget how to work. Like your bladder doesn't work, your kidneys start to not work. It's like, it's not that you're thinking, or that you're mentally even controlling your kidneys, or anyway, it's all autonomic stuff, right? Or it's just, that's what it does. But somehow there's a link between our brain and organ function.
hmm yeah, and it's also amazing that we've realized too that sometimes it's like what we are eating, what we are doing is causing the inflammation that can because um inflammation I know they linked some kind of diet like if you are having chronic inflammation it can lead to or maybe dispose you to Alzheimer's later on and even if you have like gut inflammation or like now I'm blanking because like Crohn's
It's
disease or was what ulcerative colitis. Like if you
colitis, yeah,
change your diet, you see, if you change your diet, a lot of those people do like the carnivore and then they start cutting things out. They realize that there was something that was actually that they were eating that they just didn't realize didn't sit with them.
right,
And so they actually like you think that it's like a or even when you're taught in medicine like there's a genetic component so you're when you're telling somebody about it you're like maybe this is just how you are
right,
it's really like just you're eating too much
yeah,
broccoli or whatever is not maybe broccoli is probably really good for you but you're
yeah,
eating
yeah,
whatever junk food some
yeah.
processed thing that is um just not good for your gut
No,
and
I mean, the latest American College of Surgeons Clinical Congress had a lot of different courses, but one of them, which is really interesting. So, we're looking at culture within medicine, right? So, racism, equality, those things. And one of the questions is kind of the nature nurture thing, right? So, in the Black culture slash community, they have a higher incidence of hypertension, stroke, heart disease. So, how much of that is because of where they are culturally? Um, it'd be an interesting study. So, say those folks that have gotten out of, the ghetto or whatever you want to title the community that their gangs in and stuff.
mm,
Does it kind of like, well, like the Japanese is a great example. They eat a lot of fish. They have a very high incidence of stomach cancer. They moved to America. Now that goes away. Now I have a high incidence of colon cancer, which is what we
yeah.
have. So diet has a huge influence on gastric and colon cancer. But it's it'd be interesting, and I think that's what's going to happen is that we're going to tease out how much of the things that have happened to that culture have had an impact on their health.
hmm and it
And
really
if
would give a
that
lot of
changes,
insight.
does it go away? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing how medicine kind of builds on each other because I think somebody told me recently, which made me kind of worry because they said um, something like 15 or 20 years after medical school, half of the stuff you learn will either be wrong or change. And I was like, oh crap, because I'm like holding on to that stuff now, and they're like, that's not what you're going to really care about at all.
Right.
It's all going to change. You're going to realize that whatever they taught. So you just have to be adaptable in the moment because, I mean, we're just constantly learning new things, and it's the beauty of it. There's something beautiful about not knowing everything. It gives you something to work for, and yeah. So it's really great, or it's a really interesting life that we live, being
Yeah, it is. I
on
mean,
Earth.
the classic example I think that everybody that's listening can relate to is babies. You lay them on your back, you lay them on their side, you lay them on their stomach, right? With for crib deaths, and it's like they went back and forth every year. It's like I think finally now sides are okay. So
Yes, I mean, yeah, it constantly changes, and that's what my brother, he just had a kid, and um the pediatrician's telling him all the stuff, and which I'm like, listen to your pediatrician for the most part, or but some of the stuff, it's like they have to get fed every 2 hours. Well, the baby's much older, and they haven't gone back to the pediatrician. They're like still trying to feed him every 2 hours. I'm like, I think you
right,
kind of
yeah,
you
you
don't have
can
to wake
back
him
off.
up for that. You should save
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
uh,
Best practices, yeah, not always, and they're all different.
yeah,
Some aren't
and you
going to
have to
eat
make
that. Yeah,
sure people are doing at least some. You don't want them not to feed the kids. So there's just
right,
it's a tricky thing of, you have to at least give some guidelines, because people won't follow any guidelines if you don't give them any.
right,
But if you give, I mean, certain things are unnecessary.
right. Yeah, overkill. They're
Uh,
they're going to make it just fine. Just love them. What did
exactly.
I met some old couple once. I go, "What's the secret?" They go, "Just baste your kids in love
Hmm.
and be there for them." Yeah, and then since then it's like, especially having 5 kids, it's like they learn more by not what I tell them, but by the example I portray.
Exactly. It's
So
amazing how that's really the um, what people remember,
right,
like the kind of man you were in
right,
the, yeah.
yeah.
So I think, yeah. So you've got how old is your oldest?
She May 1st just turned 32.
Oh, okay.
The youngest is 15.
Yeah. Oh, big
Yeah,
gap then.
yeah, big
Yeah.
gap. Yeah. So 32, 27. Nico turned 25 in June, and then 17 and 15.
That's how my little sister, she is so I'm 30, but she's 13 now. And so when I was carrying her around, she's, you know, maybe 1 or something. They're like, "Oh, I didn't know you had a kid already."
Yeah, no,
Uh,
yeah. The oldest played volleyball, so we'd be all over, actually Denver and Dallas and a bunch of places all over the United States. But yeah, we're standing at a McDonald's, and my wife is younger than I am, and so they look like, not quite sisters, but enough of a difference that they're definitely, my wife's older, but Chelsea's holding, my daughter's holding our baby, who's the 17-year-old now. And some lady comes up, "That's horrible. You're way too young to have a child. What are you thinking?" She's like, "Oh no, that's my stepmom right here. This is my dad's kid."
they flip it on you. They're like, "You're way too old to be having a child."
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
But
uh,
you know what? Hey, they keep you young because they need to. I mean, I stay in shape so they can keep doing stuff with them. Get in the
and
water.
that's
They
awesome.
play water polo. So, and I have to get in to show them how to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah,
It is. I don't know. Because I'm from like a big family. I'm the oldest of 7, and so there's just something. I don't have any kids myself. Honestly, that's probably a good thing. I'm gonna do your method and just wait till residency.
yeah,
Uh, but I just have been waiting. Yeah, because their kids are awesome, but it's a lot when you're going through all the transition periods of your life, and because my parents had me like very young,
yeah,
and so I remember them. Like my first memory is they're only like 24 or 25, and so I know for a fact that I'm older than they were when I like could start remembering things, and they were just kids, like they
yeah,
really
yeah,
were.
yeah.
uh so that I look back, I'm like, oh, I'm glad I got exposed to that, but heaven forbid, I don't know if
Right.
it's hard.
It is hard, and timing. I think timing is never the right time, right? So,
Mhm.
but I will say they're my 5 greatest accomplishments. So,
Oh, that's awesome. Um, well, I want not to change topics, but I just wanted to kind of ask you, how did you find, because you've gone from almost like you've been this trauma surgeon for years, then you motivational speaker. You are now you're also a co-host for a radio show and stuff. Where did
Right.
you find your inspiration? How did you find your inspiration to accomplish all this?
So I think our oldest daughter played volleyball, and she was on a club team, so several different high schools. And they would go to a Bible study with all these kids that were in high school. And so then they went to this church, and that's the church that I got hooked up with to go to Haiti and Honduras. And so I got back into Christianity. And I think now the inspiration is just a second calling, so to say. It's not just serving with my hands and my brain operating, but now it's just being there for people, speaking and a light in the darkness, give hope. Like the last chapter in the book, if you don't read the book at all, you just read the last chapter, it's going to give you hope. It's about a friend of mine who we would go to Pasadena, California every year for a trauma conference, and he didn't believe, he had no faith, and he started he retired and was dying from a Parkinson's disease that was really accelerated. And I'm not going to give away the story, but yeah, you'll see there is hope in this world. And I'm a stronger Christian now, so it's just, I'm not pushing on anybody, but I'm there for answers, right? So if you're struggling in life, we all want to belong, we all bleed the same, and I just feel a calling to be there for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So people, you'll have to buy the book. So the name of the book is what's the name?
It's Saved, and then the subtitle is True Accounting of a Trauma Surgeon's Miracles in His Life. So
yes, I've read like some inserts or whatever. I haven't read this whole thing, but I'm gonna have to check out the audiobook now, because I do have Audible and everything, and that I just find sometimes I'm like doing things and I can just listen, and it'll be like we're having a conversation again. But yeah, so I wanted to at least let people know what the name of that book is, because yeah, I think for one, just hearing your life story is, I don't know, it's pretty amazing. You've come through a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to believe, so, and just again, like you asked me about residency, I went through like the first 3 years where everything was done, opened, big incision, and then the last 3 were with a camera, right? So it's like minimally invasive stuff. And now they've got robots, which are pretty cool, and I've been trained on those. So it's really weird to step away from the operating table and look under a thing and rotate your wrists and pinch things, and it works. Yeah. So I mean, medicine's just always changing. So, but so is the world. So, and I think, Gen Z is just looking for places to belong and faith. I mean, if you think, you got to ask the question, okay, how do we get here? Why are we here? Do I have a purpose, or, and those things. And so, yeah, just here to help.
Yeah. There. I'm gonna butcher it because me coming back from Greece, because I can remember that Aristotle said something about, like, he made the change on Socrates, but it was Socrates said something about, if you're not going to question, if you can't question to understand life, then there's no point in living. And then Aristotle's like, well, there's no point in questioning anything if you don't have a plan. Right. And but all that being said, like it really is like we all are gonna wonder what our purpose is, or because we need purpose. It's weird. If you don't have purpose, you feel, I mean, if I sit all day, I feel like I'm about to drive myself insane. I can't be left with my own thoughts almost. But so I think finding that is the key really to happiness and life. Like, you just got to figure out what it is.
Right.
And so I do have one more question for you though. What what were some of the like leadership lessons? So coming from managing the trauma room to now making the book and going on missionary trips, what were some of the lessons that you learned, or like leadership lessons that you were able to come away with throughout this process?
Right. So I'll give you the biggest one. So one is lead as a team, and so you're the captain, and you go into a meeting and you should have an idea of where something should go as far as a process or peer review or whatever, and then either facilitate where you're just letting it happen naturally but trying to speed it along, or mediate where you have an opinion and you're trying to guide it to that middle ground. And the reason for that also is that if I have a teammate that didn't do quite well, they're going to feel horrible that they let down the team. So they have skin in the game, and I don't have to say anything to some of them. They just feel bad that they didn't do as well as they needed to, right? So, and the second thing is, always listen to both sides of the story. So we had a case where Doc was a leader of an oncology group. He leaves for vacation, which he hadn't done in like 20 years, for 2 weeks, goes to Europe, comes back. One of his partners complained to the CEO and that she didn't have the same contract that her husband, who's a pulmonologist, did, and why not? And so, I mean, the board and the physician panel were ready to like just impale this person, the leader. And I'm like, has anybody asked this doctor what his side of the story is? Mm-hmm. And so, no. So I'll go over. And it turns out I ended up bringing them both in the same room, and their stories both made sense. He had offered her a contract, but there was some things going on that made her potentially liable for something, and she didn't want that because she was I think she was a professor before, so she was used to being employed by an institution and not on your own where you have to understand the contract. Mm-hmm. So she legitimately did, he did offer her, and he was like willing to open his books, and I'm not holding anything back. So he was completely honest. She was completely honest. They both were right. They both had, but it wasn't grounds to fire somebody or, tell them they're doing the wrong thing. They're both doing the right things, and just there was a misunderstanding. So, yeah, and that happens a lot of times. I remember,
especially in carry on.
Yeah, no, we were at this course for some reason in our hospital early on. I want to do this Bill Adamski thing, which was a retreat, and there was an ER group that had this misconception for 20 years of you did this and it didn't happen that way. And the right people were there at the right time to go, no, this is what I saw. And everything got resolved after 20 years of these people having horrible feelings about each other. And I'm like, wow, listen to both sides. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing, especially I feel like maybe today's society too. And it's probably happened throughout all of history, is people we may be doing it even more now than ever, coming across to the other person's side and just seeing like their point of view. It really does make the world of difference, because you come to find out, like in an argument, if you listen to one person say their side of an argument, right, it really seems like the other person's the bad guy. But then when the other side, but when they are both together, there can be some kind of compromise, and and I know I've been privy to it too, or I've done it, where if I'm telling, somebody irritates me, and then I'm telling it to somebody else, I've only said the things that they said that were bad, not my response to the bad thing. Yeah. And so it's just, it's amazing that, especially if you can be a level-headed middleman, like you can actually come to, you can bring people together, and like where they would be on two opposite ends of the spectrum, right, and they can find common ground. But if there's not anybody to kind of listen to either one of the sides, then there will not be common
Yeah.
ground. So like you said, 20 years will go by, nothing will happen. They won't speak to each other, and so I really like that lesson, because we need that more, not just in healthcare, but really in society in general. Because
Yeah.
choosing sides is not the way to go. Like
No.
we're all in this together.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what's going on in society, right? They're so passionate and angry. I mean, I'd love to just walk. I'd love to have a camera and just walk around some, you know, quad area and just walk up. Why do you think society is so angry and quick to be passionate about things? And just get people's response and just
Yeah.
record it, see what they say. I mean, because my wife was walking out of Costco and she said a kid was, his mom had 5 kids and the youngest one just kind of burst because they're tired and needed to go to sleep and was protesting, and that's what she said. And then lady in her trunk loading her groceries, you're a racist, and she's like, why? It's just people just jump to conclusions, and it's you need to
Yeah.
take it easy.
Yeah. You don't know what the other person's going through, and
Right.
yeah, you come to find out, and there are bad people or people that have the wrong ideas about certain things, and you just want to. But it's amazing that people can be helped to change that as well.
Right.
And I think angering them or doing, putting yourself on the opposite side of them never, and it never said, it essentially just starts a war, like instead of
Yeah.
us coming together. Yeah. And I feel like if you asked everybody, if you went around and you asked people what was angering them so much, I think a lot of people would probably just be like social media or the internet. For some reason that has leached into a lot of people's psyche.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't matter what side you're listening to, it's inflammatory on either side. It's like my dad he called it the 3 steps. So and it's exactly what you were saying. Someone says something offensive to you, your first step's forward to throw a punch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't take that step. Take a step back and ask yourself why you feel that way, and then take the 3rd step back and say, why do they behave that way? What's going on in their life? Someone road rages you and breaks in front of you or cuts you off, or maybe they've got an emergency. Who knows? I don't know what's in their life, but just try not to be negative, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing how that you can diffuse that amygdala or those emotions when you just start to put yourself in the other person's shoes. You're like, oh yeah, they might have had an emergency, and then you go, I've had emergencies before.
Yeah.
And you're like, ooh, yeah, okay, well, I'm not angry anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, Dr. Thayer, it was great speaking to you. I don't want to take up much of your time because I know you're busy. And
no, hey, I was looking so forward to this because it takes you back. I get to relive where you are in your life, and that was such an amazing time. And so kudos to you. I think one of the podcasts, your fiance got to interview you, so that was fun.
Oh, yeah.
She sounds like a great lady. So, man, I wish you well in life. And if you ever want to be back on, I'm always there. So.
Of course. Well, we'll be in touch then. And everybody, I want you to go check out his book, Saved. And what is the name of the radio show?
Raising Expectations. It's on BBS, so it's British Broadcasting Satellite. And it's on Monday nights from 6 p.m. Pacific time and 9 Eastern time. So, you can just log in there and on BBS, Raising Expectations. Yeah, we've interviewed some. I don't know how Joe Schofield finds these people, but the Brigadier General of the USS Reagan, when Reagan died, and handed the flag to Mrs. Reagan, and he had the same commentary about team approach and leading. So it's pretty. It's just these people there's a lady, Miss Cintron, who's a dyslexia expert that my wife met. We've homeschooled for like 9 years. So her biggest health coaching thing during COVID was teaching moms how to homeschool, because the schools were going, virtual. So yeah. And then I've got my own website. It's just CraigThayer.net. So, and then Facebook, I have a nickname, Tank, from water polo, so it's Craig Tank Thayer. My
Okay.
wife wanted to get rid of Tank for a while. It was just Tank Thayer, and then all my friends said, "Where's Tank?" And then Craig Tank Thayer. So anyway, yeah.
I always think of Frank the Tank from that
Yeah.
movie. Old, yeah.
No, when I was nicknamed that, it was on a whiteboard at the beginning of practice, and when I was playing Masters in 2001, and I go, that means I'm slow. I'm tanking it or whatever. He goes, "No, we can't get around you." So yeah, it was a
That's
compliment.
that's a yeah. Oh yeah. That means you're yeah, that's a usually when you get the nickname, it's not because you're the worst person on the team, it's because you're good.
There's a whole community in water polo that have no idea what I do or what my real name is.
Oh, really?
Because you get artificially raised on a pedestal as a doc. Great ER doc, first day of med school. Look, I'm going to talk about instruments, stethoscope, otoscopes. You look at me as a student as this guy on a pedestal because I've had all this training. So don't do that. You need to evaluate whether you want Welsh Allen or whatever brand, HP, stethoscope, or Rappaport or whatever. They have different qualities. So don't take what I say as, absolute dictum. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's amazing that you have to you've got to make your own distinctions. But I will say that going and like reaching out and speaking to those people, like going to that seminar where the guy's talking about stethoscopes and then going to another one where another guy's talking and you can see two different opinions, that allows your brain to understand like the knowledge, or like having people speak about their lives like you do and things like that. Like you're able to process your own tragedies or your own stuff to actually get to it, like moving forward and making a decision. So I do think like intellectual speaking and doing or just listening to like engaging in that, it really does, it broadens your brain a little bit. Like you have this whole I mean, I can't act like I was super brilliant, but like since medical school, because I knew I needed to take all that knowledge in, I was grabbing it from whatever resource I could. And then I realized like even my speaking and how I communicated with people was getting better, and my ability to think through problems. And so it's like, oh, okay, like this is kind of bettering one part of you can better like the whole. And so I think people like you and people that are very like motivational and intelligent thinkers are important in the world.
Yeah. Well, and you, I mean, kudos for doing this. I mean, podcasting is an art, and it's a lot of work. I've read, 15 minutes of taping is going to be an hour's worth of editing.
Yes.
It's work behind the scenes, like the Audible. I'm like, I feel sorry for that editor. He's probably going, I can't fix that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, my editor, who is my fiance, is currently on strike. I think she's just trying to take my role as the speaker now, so that I'll be the one editing.
You gave her a taste of being the interviewer.
Yeah, she's never going back to editing again. Well, Dr. Thayer, it was great to have you on. Everybody go check out his book, his radio show. It was really great speaking to you.
Yeah, you too. Yeah. Honor, man. And I'm proud of you. You're in a great service industry, it's not even an industry, but it's just helping people, and that's cool. And you're in the trenches. So kudos to you.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir.
No
we appreciate it. Thank you everybody for joining, and we're out.